journalist, MP, Rajya Sabha of the Congress, but editor for years, has written on these issues. Professor Aditya Mukherjee, former professor history and the chair of historical studies in JNU. Professor Rakesh Sinha, author and member of parliament at the Rajya Sabha of the BJP, and Dr. Vikram Sampath, author of a two-part biography on Veer Savarkar, the legacy of Savarkar. Appreciate all of you joining us on the show. Let's start our freedom fight debate by raising the first big question. Jawaharlal Nehru's contribution, has it been undermined by the BJP government, or has Nehru been given excessive importance by the previous Congress government? So undermined by the BJP or given excessive importance by the Congress? That's the question I want to raise. Let me take that question straight to you, Vikram Sampath. How do you see it? Do you believe that the manner, for example, in your home state of Karnataka, an advertisement comes out and pushes Nehru into a small little line drawing? He's not given any prominence, while Savarkar is in front row with Mahatma Gandhi. How do you see it? Is this a conscious attempt to diminish Nehru as a freedom hero?
I think the issue has a lot of nuances, Rajdeep. One is, of course, for the longest time, I think Nehru and the Nehru dynasty has got incommensurate importance in the country. There was an RTI which revealed that hundreds and hundreds of institutions, whether it's hospitals, railway stations, airports, stadiums, contests, sports events, everything, awards are named after just one particular family. So at some point in our nation's history, there is a need to balance it out, where other heroes, it's not just that one person or one family contributed to the freedom and the development of this nation. So lots of heroes and heroines who deserve to get their due. And that balancing is a churn that's happening all the time in the political as well as in the social system. But at the same time, I personally do not think it was a great idea to, especially at a time like this, when we are celebrating 75 years of independence, to have dropped Nehru's photograph from that collage, because whether one likes it or not, you can't wish away your history. So, he certainly deserved to find a place among the galaxy of all the other leaders, just as Savarkar also deserves to find a place. So I think the mistake that is being repeated of what the earlier dispensation did, that to actually highlight one, you suppress all the other people, that need not happen. But in the same breath, Rajdeep, I'd also like to suggest that just a day later, Rajasthan government came up with another advertisement which showcased only Nehru. So how then does it justify the absence of Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel, Ambedkar, and so many others whom the Congress would question as to why their Nehru's face is not there in that advertisement? Similarly, just throwing the spotlight only on him, that is equally wrong. So I think, when history becomes captive to politicians and electoral politics, I think it is a huge casualty, both to the discipline as well as the legacy of all these great leaders.
You've set the stage in a sense to look at Jawaharlal Nehru, as you say, with a more nuanced picture. Kumar Ketkar, as a long-time admirer of Nehru, do you want to respond to what is being said by Dr. Sampath? The RTI he quotes, 2012, suggests that there were 450 projects, buildings, schemes named after the Nehru-Gandhi family, a number of them after Jawaharlal. And as a result, many other freedom heroes were actually not given the kind of importance that they perhaps deserved. So the BJP is arguing we are trying to correct some of those distortions by not giving excessive focus on an individual. How do you respond?
Are we discussing Nehru's role in independence movement and post-independence, or we are discussing so many memorials which are in the name of Nehru or Nehru family? We are discussing, I suppose, Nehru's role and apparently vis-a-vis Savarkar's role in the freedom movement. I do not see...
No, I'll come to the Savarkar. I'll come to Savarkar in a moment. I will come to Savarkar. But just this argument being made that Nehru is either diminished by the BJP or given excessive importance by the Congress.
Nehru did not name the memorials in his name, like Modi named his own stadium name in Ahmedabad. So let us not bring up all the memorials named after Nehru or Nehru family into what is the role of Nehru in the freedom movement and post-freedom movement, that is after independence, what did he do to build modern India? I can see clearly that without Nehru, it was impossible to find a place for a modern India in the current history. After 1924, the first release of Savarkar, what exactly contribution he made in building institutions or in giving a new thought, giving new idea? What was his worldview? 1924 is a very strange time. It is only 5 years after the First World War and about 15 years before the Second World War. The world was changing. What is Savarkar's worldview at that point of time? What is Savarkar's contribution between 1924
So you are going back to Savarkar. I'm coming to Savarkar. Sir, I'm coming to Savarkar. I asked you a question about Nehru per se.
Yeah, but that's what I'm telling you. Between 1924 or between 1915, Nehru continuously is in the picture of the freedom movement. He's fighting, he's struggling, he's on Satyagraha, he's in jail, he's writing books. He is constantly part of the freedom movement because you cannot separate Nehru from the freedom movement as much as you cannot separate Gandhi from the freedom movement. And therefore, to ask about Nehru and say that what is his overall status and what is the given status by the Congress party to the so-called dynasty, I think this itself is a very outrageous question, because Nehru's role, Nehru's contribution cannot be erased by a few placards and few holdings and a few textbooks which they are writing. You are questioning about rewriting. Actually, they have rewritten history, but that will not last. History is there. It doesn't require to be rewritten. Written history is enough for Nehru to survive politically and historically.
Okay. Professor Mukherjee, no one should deny Nehru's enormous contribution. I think a number of people don't recognize that here was someone born with a silver or golden spoon who spent a lot of his life completely contributing to the freedom struggle and then nation building. But the excessive importance to him is the accusation that the BJP makes, to the point where other freedom heroes, the Boses, the Patels, indeed the entire revolutionaries of the 1920s were denied their due. Do you go along with that?
No, I certainly do not. Firstly, there's absolutely nothing wrong in praising Nehru, in remembering him, because his contribution was to the freedom movement and to the building of modern India was clearly enormous. 30 years of his life he fights the British. 9 of those years he's in jail. And after independence, he's Prime Minister for 17 years. I mean, he contributes enormously to the making of modern India. But to suggest that in remembering Nehru, we are downgrading anybody else is completely false. In the name of saying that you are only talking about Nehru, this attempt to smuggle in people like Savarkar and others is, in my opinion, not the right.
No, but he's seen through. Is he seen through the prism of his heirs? And because there is this whole argument of dynasty politics, therefore Nehru gets diminished because the heirs are accused of only focusing on Nehru at the cost of others. Sardar Patel was not given the same importance, is the argument by the Congress party post-independence.
But that is not true. This RTI that is being cited, that, so many 100 memorials to Nehru. Please do an RTI and find out how many statues of Ambedkar are there, how many of Bhagat Singh, how many of Gandhiji, and you will find that Nehru is nowhere near it. So this way of looking back at history, how many times have you praised him and how many times have you praised that? This is not the way to do it. There were great people in our national movement. We must remember all of them, their individual contributions. Praising Nehru does not diminish Bhagat Singh. You
make an important point. So praising Nehru does not diminish the other freedom heroes is what you're suggesting. Rakesh Sinha, you want to respond since the BJP has taken the lead in this campaign. Do you agree with the way in which Kumar Ketkar, Aditya Mukherjee are saying praising Nehru doesn't mean diminishing others?
The history writing has been fractured. And this created a blinkered vision among the historians. It is not important that whether Nehru played a role or not played the role. He had definitely played the role in the freedom movement. Nobody can deny. Having said that, the glorification program of history has denied the roles of others. I am just giving some examples. U. Tirot Singh, The person who was in East Khasi Hills in Meghalaya, or Triloknath Chakravarti, who wrote 30 years in prison, there are hundreds and thousands of the freedom fighters who have been missing from the history books. You cannot mention, someone can say we cannot mention every freedom fighter, but the narrative created, that narrative is centered around certain elite intellectuals of the freedom movement. That is the problem. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision to expand the history is not to deny someone, expand the expansion of the history, making its horizon larger horizon, so that the true picture of the history should come. I am giving 2 examples, Rajdeep. We know the Jallianwala Bagh Kand, but there was also in Odisha, Rakt Tirth, 28 people martyred the day 28 September 1942. Right. That is missing from the history book. The reason is that the narrative the historians, Marxist and Nehruvian historians created, they substantiated only those facts, which supports their narrative. That is the problem. And I am objecting about the Nehru's role, dubious role. In 1939, when Subhash Chandra Bose, the elected president of the Congress, was being unceremonially removed as the presidency, he was forced to resign. That time, Nehru, being the friend of Bose and the part of the Congress Socialist Party, what role did he play? He wrote a long pamphlet, "Where are we?" Just like that, some title was there. So Nehru always created situation to make his side safer and promoting himself in the hierarchy of the Congress. That does not mean that he has not played the role, but he was playing the very dubious role.
You are saying dubious role. Let's settle this. Let's settle this. Professor Makhanlal, I've heard this over the last week. In fact, there are those who are questioning Nehru's role in partition and suggesting that Nehru was the one, along with Jinnah, even though Nehru was a fierce critic of Jinnah, who was responsible for partition. Do you believe that's an unfair way of depicting Jawaharlal Nehru?
I am not for one who would like to diminish freedom fighter called Jawaharlal Nehru. But Aditya Mukherjee made a wonderful point. He said in that process, we must not forget other freedom fighters. We must not ignore other freedom fighters. But unfortunately, that is what precisely has happened. And it has happened because of certain mental temperament. I will take you to 1929, when Motilal Nehru writes to Gandhiji that it is my desire, last desire, that Jawahar should succeed me as Congress president. That is from where this mentality of self-promotion comes up. And let us go back to 29th April 1946, when the president of the Congress was to be chosen, and at that time it was very clear, the person who is chosen as president of the Congress, elected as president of Congress, will be invited to form the government. It is on the record, if not others, Aditya will bear me out, that of the 15 Congress Pradesh committees has nominated Sardar Patel, 3 abstained. Jawaharlal Nehru was not nominated even by 1. Therefore, who was elected unopposed? Congress President Sardar Patel, and in consequence the first Prime Minister of India. Nehru vetoed it. He said, I don't accept that. I will break the party. And Gandhi, in order to save the Congress, save the country from various problems, persuaded Sardar Patel to withdraw. That's how Nehru became the first Prime Minister, not unopposed, not elected, but nominated by Gandhiji. Another aspect must be understood very clearly. From 1947 to 1957, all the freedom fighter colleagues with Nehru left Congress, left right from Rajaji, first Governor General and second Home Minister, to Lohia, Jayaprakash, Pilu Modi, all these people left. Why they left? It has to be assessed in order to assess the personality of leader called Nehru. Because after all, Nehru was the leader. Why all these very great leaders left the Congress?
So you're saying you need a dispassionate analysis of Nehru's contribution, free of either deifying him as some kind of a demigod, no personality cult, and allow him to be judged for what he contributed. Right?
Absolutely, I agree that I'm not saying demystification of Nehru. I will not go into that. I will say along with Nehru, his conduct and vis-a-vis other leaders should also be assessed.
Okay.
He was not the only leader. Did anybody talk about Netaji? Does anybody remember Rajgopalachari? Does anybody remember Rajendra Prasad? Aditya Mukherjee was saying that Nehru was seen on canvas right from 1924. So also Netaji, so also Sardar Patel, so also Rajendra Prasad, so also other leaders. Are they not to be remembered? Okay, it's 1924. If that is the line taken for Nehru's appearance on the horizon, others also are there.
I'll give Aditya Mukherjee a quick response and then move on to our next big question. Very quick response, Aditya Mukherjee, to what you've heard from Professor Makhan Lal. We cannot create a personality cult around a Nehru.
I wonder who has created this personality cult. It is being suggested that we are all writing that kind of history. No historian has done it. Which history book is being referred to?
Politicians have done it. The Congress party did it.
The manner in which Indian historiography has grown, and it has grown fantastically, it was considered one of the best in the world, has been precisely to take away from individuals into understanding people, into understanding societal movements, etc., etc. So there's no question that any serious historian would have eulogized Nehru and sort of made him into this great hero. No, his role is certainly taken into account, but there is no history book that I have read in which the role of Gandhi or of Bhagat Singh or of Bose or of Dadabhai Naoroji or of Tilak or of Patel is not there. I mean, this is an imaginary fight that is being created, you know.
It's an imaginary fight that is being created, you're saying. There will be those, of course, who will say that Jawaharlal Nehru was this challenger in a way, Vikram Sampath. And remember, I recorded this interview with Vikram Sampath because I asked him that there seems to be an attempt to demonize Nehru by the BJP or the RSS at times, Sangh Parivar, because Nehru was seen all his life to challenge the Hindutva vision of nationalism. Do you agree with that? There is an element of almost seeking revenge on Nehru because he was this all-powerful figure post-47 who was challenging Hindutva?
Nehru was also, the other side of Nehru was he was very intolerant of any opposing viewpoints, including the manner in which most of his opponents were subdued, and to posit, only one narrative as the major narrative of the nation, that is something that a lot of his critics would also talk about. So while demonization, I already mentioned that nobody needs to be demonized, nobody needs to be disparaged, but I think a dispassionate assessment and a critique of a person's failures and successes, I think that is very important. For the longest time, a lot of the loopholes, the problems which we are still facing, whether it's in Kashmir, whether it's our relations with China, our place in the United Nations, so many of these lapses which India is still suffering from, I think the time has come where one also looks at it in a dispassionate manner, an assessment of the positives and negatives of any person's legacy, which for the longest time has only been glorification. So now when the tide is turning the other way, it cannot always be called as a revenge history, but it is somewhere a balancing. But care must be taken that, the personal demonization, getting into the personal life and details of individuals, I think that is certainly, extremely disgusting and something that should not be done. But an assessment of a statesman, a leader, their pluses, their hits and misses, I think it's very much open for scrutiny for any historian, for any scholar to do.
Let's then come to the second question, because this is a question which again has become top of the mind. Is Savarkar a divisive figure? Should Savarkar be seen purely as a divisive figure? Remember, there were riots or flare-ups this week in Shimoga, in Karnataka, over Savarkar posters there. Kumar Ketkar, you start first this. Do you believe that Savarkar by his very nature is divisive? Or do you believe, as many people in Maharashtra believe, that he's not got his due? And maybe the BJP is finally giving Savarkar his due as a freedom fighter.
At the outset, you must recognize that BJP and its earlier avatar Jansangh were opposed to Savarkar. They were opposed to Hindutva Sabha. Jansangh fought against Hindutva Sabha. Jansangh did not believe in Savarkar's line of thinking, because Savarkar, they thought, is actually distorting the idea of Hindu Rashtra, which was, according to them, a cultural Hindu Rashtra. So let us not bring Savarkar as if he is a representative of BJP or Jansangh. Savarkar never supported the RSS. In fact, let us not forget that Hindu Mahasabha was formed in 1915 when Savarkar was in jail, and RSS is formed in 1925, 10 years after Hindu Mahasabha. Savarkar became leader of Hindu Mahasabha after he was released in 1924.
But do you see him as a freedom hero? Do you see him as a freedom hero?
No, let us not say that Savarkar was humiliated by Congress or by others or by anybody. Savarkar was primarily humiliated by the Jansangh and the RSS. RSS before, and Jansangh was born in 1950.
Right.
So let us not compare unnecessarily such things. And moreover, you must not forget that after 1924 or 1927, Savarkar's contribution to India's development or India's freedom, they were 20 years before. 1947 we got freedom. He actually started working in 1927, but work for what? What institutions did he build? What worldview did he give? What was the new idea that he gave to the world? So many ideas were actually in conflict with each other between 1910 and 1950. The world was changing, and all of the leaders, including Patel and Bose and others, died prematurely. You can say it is very unfortunate. Savarkar did not die. Savarkar was alive till 1966. But what is his actual contribution? And therefore, while appreciating Savarkar's view towards science, Savarkar's view towards patriotic India, nobody questions that. Not even Congress. Actually, Indira Gandhi allowed the portrait.
That's right.
Not that. The question is not. The question is what is his actual contribution?
Okay,
in the actual freedom movement and post-independence India build-up.
Okay, let Rakesh Sinha very quickly answer that. Rakesh Sinha, you all make so much of Savarkar. The fact is, according to Kumar Ketkar, he had an uneasy relationship with the RSS, but more importantly, he's questioning his real contribution to the freedom struggle. You cannot equate him to the Gandhis and the Nehrus and the Patels and the manner that is being attempted.
Savarkar has never been the part of the RSS or later Jansangh. He is our ideological neighbor. And being the ideological neighbor, we have certain commonalities and we respect his contribution in the freedom movement, his sacrifices. Despite all the propaganda, continuous propaganda, undiminished propaganda by the Marxist and Nehruvian historians and political leaders, Savarkar's impact on the masses remained undiminished. And inspiration remain undiminished because masses are not unwise. They understand the meaning of sacrifice. They understand the nature of sacrifice. Now the second point of Savarkar, one thing
as an
always
apologist.
is that
the Congress sees him, a large section of the secularists see him as an apologist, as someone who didn't participate in Quit India, who post 1924 didn't get involved in the real struggle.
Rajdeep, let me complete this.
Yes.
One question which is always raised, that his apology. I am telling you that during the freedom movement there has been various strategies, and Ram Prasad Bismil in the Kakori conspiracy case, Asfullah Khan wrote 3 mercy petitions. Does it mean that he was a traitor? And 62 intellectuals of Varanasi sent a petition to Viceroy to forgive him. Ram Prasad Bismil wrote that it was a mistake on his part that he participated in the movement. Now he would not participate. Maharshi Arvind shifted from India to Pondicherry, which were under French settlement. So does it mean that all these people were against India's freedom or were traitors? This means that Marxists have selectively targeted Savarkar, and every freedom fighter has their own perspective and the role.
Okay,
Third point, important point is that Savarkar defined, just last ending, Savarkar defined nationalism in the civilizational context. He has never attacked the Muslims. He defined India as a geocultural nationalism. And geocultural nationalism, and he also defined the Muslim behavioral pattern and their value of life and Shariat, which don't allow them to be mixed with the India's geocultural nationalism, which we are finding that all over the world there are certain problems, that there is a binary all over the world emerging. So Savarkar was a very true in his context, defining the India's nationalism.
You made, that's a contentious issue. We'll try and come to that. But since Vikram Sampath has written now 2 biographies of 2-part biography of Savarkar, when I recorded him earlier, I asked Vikram this. In Karnataka this week, Vikram, we've seen protests leading to curfew, communal clashes over posters of Savarkar and Tipu Sultan over who is the bigger freedom fighter. Let's look at Savarkar. Is he a divisive figure? Do you accept that the manner in which the BJP portrays him in a positive light will attract a lot of criticism as well from those who are anti-Savarkar?
Who is a divisive figure and who is not? I mean, who decides that? Because there can be politics that can be played out about anybody, of the past. Whether Savarkar deserves to find a place in the pantheon of freedom fighters, I think that is the more pertinent question. And there the answer is yes, considering the fact that here was a man who established India's first secret society, someone, the Abhinav Bharat, someone who spearheaded the revolutionary movement sitting outside India for 5 years in London. Someone who organized the first bonfire of foreign clothes in 1905, someone who spent 14 torturous years in Kalapani in the Andaman, suffering the worst of inhuman tortures there, who was given 2 transportations of life of 25 plus 25, 50 long years. Someone who was an inspiration for revolutionaries through his book on the 1857, what was called the Mutiny. He called it the first war of Indian independence. So his contribution, his role is a fact of history that no one can deny, whatever their political leanings might be. So to make that a matter of street fight and particularly politics, that is the unfortunate part. And to posit him also with an 18th century ruler who operated under completely different circumstances, by yardsticks, by standards of statecraft, warfare, which were very different from the 19th and 20th century. So this false equivalence of Savarkar versus Tipu Sultan, these binaries that operate, I think that is extremely unfortunate, because it's like comparing apples and oranges. The two people are completely different. Tipu Sultan was a medieval ruler. He ruled by the standards of his time. He was not a freedom fighter, so to say. He was a brave soldier who fought for his honor, for his kingdom. So I think these are completely different things which get conflated in the politics of today.
You want to respond to that, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, this attempt to posit in Karnataka, for example, a Tipu Sultan as a freedom hero who took on the British in the 18th century, and then you look at Savarkar, who is the great, who contributed more? Do you believe this sort of Hindu-Muslim binary comes in, that Savarkar is then positioned as a Hindutva hero and Tipu Sultan as a Muslim hero? Do you believe that's unfortunate, or that is inevitable given the polarization in society?
It is extremely unfortunate. I'll come to Tipu Sultan in a moment, but please allow me first to talk about your first question, whether Savarkar was a divisive person or not. Everybody has agreed that in his early years, he played a revolutionary role for which there is nobody who questions that. The questioning comes from his apologies, which again everybody has accepted, but they're saying that others also apologized. But it's not a question of that he apologized to come out and then fight the British, but he didn't. What did he do after that? The moment he's released, in 1937, when he comes out of Ratnagiri, he becomes the president of the Hindu Mahasabha, and in 1937, he declares the two-nation theory, that Hindus and Muslims constitute two nations. And then when in 1938, the Muslim League talks about Pakistan, then in his 1938 presidential address, and this is important, please allow me to say this, he now changes. He says, no, it's India, there are no two nations in India. There is only one nation. The Hindus are the nation and the Muslims are a community. And so that you can understand better what he means, he says, he clarifies, just as in Germany, the Germans are the nation and the Jews are a community. In Turkey, the Turks are the nation and the Armenians are the community. Now, please remember what happened to the Germans and the Jews, and the comparison of Muslims in that context is something to worry about. Thirdly, what does Savarkar do, after he begins his apologies, etc., before he's released? One reason why he's released, he comes up with this fantastic theory of Hindutva, where by definition, the Muslims and the Christians become foreigners, because he says only if your Pitri Bhu and your Punya Bhu is in India, then only you can be an Indian, right? By that definition, so all the Christians in America, in England, in South Korea, they cannot be nationalists of those countries, because their Punya Bhu is in Jerusalem. So but this notion has been used.
So you're in a way dividing Savarkar between his early years and later years, and saying in a way his later years in a later years raise a huge question mark, therefore shadow his earlier years. But, I asked this question.
And divisive.
I asked this question in a way
give me 30
yes,
seconds
I'll give you to Vikram Sampath, since he's written this biography. There are those who believe, Vikram, that while Savarkar's mission was to create a sense of national identity, his identity was based on a specific religious foundation, i.e. Hindutva, or as was suggested, Punya Bhumi and Pitra Bhumi. Post the 1920s, therefore, do you agree that Savarkar, by his very nature, becomes a divisive figure? So it's not just his apology, but his politics, where he promotes a particular religious identity, made him a divisive figure, Vikram.
That again, Rajdeep, I think is made by people who have not read Savarkar, or who are sadly ignorant about the facts of history. I mean, if you read Savarkar's speeches as the president of the Hindu Mahasabha that he led for 4-5 years, he makes it clear that what is his conception of a Hindu Rashtra, the behemoth that is shown to us as if it's going to gobble up everyone who does not belong to the Hindu faith. He says in that, and I quote him, that the minorities of this country need not even have a ghost of suspicion in their mind that all their legitimate political, social, cultural, linguistic, and religious rights will be infringed upon. The majority, the Hindus, will not get any extra privileges only because they are more in number. And likewise, the minorities will not get any extra concessions because they are less in number. Everybody is supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law. The religion that you follow is your private business in the confines of your home. And he said, don't bring that into the public space and into politics. So what more is secularism? I mean, this was also ratified in the constitution of the Free Hindustan state, a draft constitution that the Hindu Mahasabha came up with in 1945. I urge people to read that, where the Hindu Mahasabha, which is shown today as an ultra, radical right-wing party, was advocating for citizenship, for minority rights, where faith, where religion did not come into question at all. Nobody was getting extra concessions or privileges on the basis of religion.
Right.
So secularism in the true sense of the term was what was on offer, while this concept of the Hindu Rashtra was put forth by Savarkar. Now, the sad part is nobody has read this. Hindutva becomes a bogeyman for which anybody can attach any meaning and either scare people or lure people. And that is the unfortunate part of it all.
So let us look, that's a good point to turn to my next question, which is that the charge which is made is that the Sangh Parivar, now in power, is seeking to appropriate the freedom struggle because, so is the accusation by their critics, they didn't participate enough in it. Professor Makhanlal, how do you see that? Is this a power shift? These debates are now taking place because for decades the RSS was not in power. Now in power, they are seeking in a way to create their own historiography.
Yes, I will come to it, but Rajdeep, just permit me half a minute to speak about Savarkar.
Okay.
Savarkar died 57 years ago. He did not contribute anything to new ideas, anything, but I am surprised that we are still discussing it so intensely. So there is something there which is not leaving us. Number two, Savarkar was spoken that he gave the two-nation theory in 1937-39, but I will request all my friends to read Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's 1878 Meerut speech, where he clearly said Hindu and Muslims are two nations, they cannot live together. It's all published, I'm not talking from my pocket. And then also read Allama Iqbal's Muslim League Presidential Address 1930 given in Allahabad, 1931 given in Lahore. That where he emphasized exactly what Sir Syed said. So let us not put somebody else's fruits in somebody else's basket.
Okay.
Fruits were given by Sir Syed and Allama Iqbal. Let it remain there in their basket. Now let us come back to RSS and its contribution to the freedom struggle. You see, all the organizations were not part of freedom struggle. RSS was established as a cultural organization, very clearly talking about the upliftment of character of human beings, not Hindus, human beings, Indians. It is not necessary for everybody to participate. Whole India of 34 crores were not participating everywhere, but very clearly Hedgewar has said and also Guruji has said that all the members, those who want to participate in freedom struggle, they are free to participate, all the members of RSS, but they must leave the organization for the time being, or as long as they want to fight. And hundreds of people must have left, and they had left the RSS to fight the freedom struggle and then gone back. You know, RSS has a different culture where you do not advertise your own good work, where you do not hanker for recognition.
Because the RSS finds itself now in power through the BJP, it is trying to appropriate the freedom struggle, is what is suggested by one view. And there is Makhanlal who says, Professor Makhanlal says it's only course correction. Do you believe that the RSS has not contributed enough and therefore they are trying to rewrite and even distort history at times, including virtually blaming Nehru, Gandhi for partition?
I don't know, because the RSS, even at that time, during Golwalkar's time, it made its viewpoint very clear that it was not getting into the politics of the time. It was more of a social reform and a cultural organization. So it was not, involved in many of the movements, though, of course, it participated much against the wishes of several of its leaders, even in the Quit India movement. Leaders of the Hindu Mahasabha too went against the wishes of Savarkar and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee to participate in the Quit India movement because it was such a popular mass movement. So I don't think this legacy of the freedom struggle belongs to any one person or one organization or so. It had numerous millions of people, millions of Indians, men and women and children who participated in it. So to say that it is somebody's preserve and somebody else is trying to appropriate it, I think that is not the right way of looking at it. And today the government of India, it's the government of India which is celebrating this momentous milestone. It is commemorating these heroes and heroines, many of whom have not received their due in the last 75 years. I don't think that can be looked at as appropriation, least of all distortion of history, because history is something that is constantly being revised, rewritten. There is multiple drafts of that, which as a historian, eminent historian had said, every work of history is an interim draft. So people are constantly relooking at this in the wake of new evidence, new research. And so it is only appropriate that even our freedom struggle is relooked. The contribution of several streams which have not been acknowledged so far are also given their due. So I do not look at it as either appropriation or distortion of what is a legitimate process of historiography.
So let's therefore ask the final question. Has the time come to relook at this entire period and allow new histories, in a way, historiography to be written and thereby give due to those perhaps who didn't get their due? Kumar Ketkar, why don't you take that? Do you believe that we need to relook 75 years on, relook at the period and give a due to maybe those whose contribution has not been recognized enough?
History is always relooked at, and therefore there are so many history books. The question is not relooking, but distorting the facts. For instance, BJP is trying to, or RSS is trying to appropriate even Bhagat Singh, who was an atheist and hardcore socialist. When he was hanged, he was actually calling himself a socialist revolutionary, and BJP is trying to appropriate him. Vallabhbhai Patel, who banned RSS, openly said that RSS was directly or indirectly responsible for Gandhiji's murder. They want to create a statue. So BJP and RSS are trying constantly to appropriate these people. Can you show me a list of at least 12 people who were jailed, who were hanged, jailed for a long time? Don't put Savarkar. Savarkar was jailed prior to birth of RSS, prior to birth of even Hindu Mahasabha.
So let me get
appropriation.
Yes.
Appropriation of the freedom fighters has been being done by the RSS and the BJP constantly, and therefore we must clear that while we looking at history, we must not distort history, and while distorting history, they must not ignore completely facts. So much of facts they are distorting, and so much of facts they are ignoring, as if they are rewriting the history which doesn't exist, They are creating a mythology.
Mr. Ketkar, let's allow Rakesh Sinha to respond. You're saying, I'm just going to...
Fake history.
Okay, Rakesh Sinha, in a way what is being suggested is while rewriting history is welcome, the fact is if you distort history, if you sort of appropriate icons like Sardar Patel, like Netaji Bose, like Bhagat Singh, and suggest in a way that they come from the same stream as the RSS, then there will be the charge of distortion. How do you see it? Are you trying to give these people their due, or are you trying to distort history because of politics?
You know, selective history is very dangerous for the posterity. As for the appropriation of Netaji, I am just giving one example because in debate you cannot cite many examples.
Yes.
The British intelligence report says the RSS and INA had collaboration, and they characterize both the organizations as the fifth column. Fifth column is traitors, according to Britishers. And the RSS was helping the INA, and moreover, the RSS played a vital role in 1932-30 movement, the civil disobedience movement. The most important thing about the RSS and Dr. Hedgewar, the RSS founder, was that he propounded a theory that in the anti-colonial movement, there should not be two flags, two leaders, two programs, and two platforms. That's why he relinquished the position of the RSS came with the Swayamsevak to participate in the movement. He could have come as the RSS chief. He could have come have with the Bhagwa Jhanda and the RSS banner. No, right. It was the Gandhian banner. Despite this agreement with Gandhian philosophy and ideology, on many occasions, on many issues,
Kumar Ketkar is saying how many RSS? So you deny what Kumar Ketkar is saying that RSS did not participate.
Rajdeep, just 10 seconds. Yes. You know, Marxist historians have selective approach. I am telling you, Asti and Chimur. RSS played very vital role in 1942, but they have undermined. On Mopla, they have projected the communal violence in Mopla in the post-Khilafat movement. The rape of the Hindu woman, burning of the houses, and the killing of the people and conversion. They projected it was an economic interpretation. So I think that there should be a holistic approach to writing the history.
Okay.
That is not a question being asked by Rajdeep.
He wants you to answer the question, did the RSS fully participate, yes or no? How many RSS people went to jail? Very quick answer. You know, in 1930s, almost 12 RSS people were jailed in one day with Dr. Hedgewar. Later on, the RSS people arrested in Nagpur. Marthand Jog, proscribed literature, he read in the public meeting, he was arrested. So there were a number of people who went to the jail. In 1942, and in Patna, those 7 children who martyred hoisting the national flag at the secretariat, 2 were the RSS Swayamsevak. In Chimur, the movement was led by the RSS Swayamsevak. Okay, so let me... You overplayed the role of communist 1942 who were actually traitors. They were the Britishers. Aditya Mukherjee has to respond whether I want everyone to get equal time. Therefore, let me conclude with the 2 professional historians asking them, is there, Professor Makhanlal, any individual who you feel has not got his due or her due? And I emphasize her now because even in the Karnataka advertisement, there were no women for some reason, including the likes of Sarojini Naidu. But I want to ask, do you believe there is an individual who deserves his or her due and could become the basis for looking at the freedom struggle?
Rajdeep, my answer will be that freedom struggle must be seen in its totality. Some people may have been 9 years in the jail, but some may have been, 9 years in Andaman Nicobar Island, as in Kalapani. Some people may have been there indifferently. What I am saying is, our efforts as a historian should be that we should try to find as many as freedom fighters, put them on the same level. It's another matter that somebody contributed more. Now somebody says that Savarkar did not give. Bhagat Singh doesn't deserve from that parameter. He did not give any new idea after 1930. He did not participate in freedom struggle. That's not the way to look at history. And one thing I would like to say, final line, all history is contemporary history. History is written, rewritten on the basis of few facts, new evidence, and also the new kind of questions that are asked to the old. Each generation has to write its own history, and that is why It is said that all history is contemporary history. In history, you can never say final words.
Okay,
it has to be taken as for the time being.
That's very well put. You know, I come from Goa, and I know that there are many Goans who believe that the freedom fighters of Goa who fought the Portuguese were subject to enormous torture, have never been nationally recognized. Professor Mukherjee, a final word, 30 seconds. Has the time come to relook at this period?
Yes. By relooking, if it means that include more people, understand greater layers of society which participated, yes. But if it means inventing, I would ask the counter question. I mean, if you say things like, please make up your mind, was RSS a cultural organization or did they participate fantastically in the civil disobedience and other movements? Two things have been said at the same time. May I just in the end quote Golwalkar, just shortly before Gandhiji's murder, a proof of his being a cultural organization. He says, the Sangh would finish Pakistan. This is December 1947. If anybody stood in their way, they will finish them also. No matter whether it be the Nehru government or any other government. The RSS has means whereby their opponents could be immediately silenced. And the Mahatma was, as you know, very shortly after that silenced.
Right.
So that history also needs to be written. When you celebrate Savarkar, do not forget what Sardar Patel said, that he had no doubt in his mind, that an extreme group of the Hindu Mahasabha led by Savarkar is what led to the killing of the Mahatma. So please include that also in history.
Let me leave it there. It's been extremely engrossing listening to all these fine minds telling us what they think about our freedom heroes and how they should be interpreted by a new India. Let's face the facts of history. Let's give due to those who deserve it. And let's not pit one freedom hero against another. This country in its 75th year deserves, as I started off by saying, more unity, less division, less politics with our freedom heroes. Thank you all very much for joining us on the Freedom Fight. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Jai Hind. Namaskar.
Raj.
I don't read the news. I read between the lines to tell you the true version of events, the true story of our times.
To document grief, the toughest assignment for any journalist to be.
From those who matter,
women politicians going to stick up for each other.
Of those who should matter, I document the truth. I don't distort the truth. I don't glamorize the truth. I don't gloss over the truth.
The ghosts of India's contentious medieval history have come knocking again.
I hustle for the truth, on the ground, in the newsroom, in the studio. I don't try to grab eyeballs.
I inform you to make you see the point.
To the Point with Preeti Chaudhary. At these times, only on India Today.
This video of a man performing an extremely dangerous stunt on Independence Day in Soramau, Unnao district has gone viral on social media. The man was later identified as Bhim Kumar of Adampur Bareti village. He was arrested under the National Honour Act, also known as the Prevention of Insult to National Honour Act 1971. So what is this act and what falls under this? Let's understand. Every citizen of India must remember that he is an Indian and has every right in this country, but with certain duties. These were the words of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And to promote and maintain nationalism and patriotism, the Prevention of Insults to National Honour Act was enacted by the Parliament of India on 23rd December 1971. The aim was to stop insulting or disrespecting the national symbols, including the national flag, the Indian Constitution, the national anthem, as well as the national map. It also intends to punish those who defame, degrade or disrespect the country. The act applies to all of India and was...
I don't read the news. I read between the lines to tell you the true version of events, the true story of our times.
To document grief,
the toughest assignment for any journalist to be from those who matter,
Women politicians going to stick up for each other.
of those who should matter. I document the truth. I don't distort the truth. I don't glamorize the truth. I don't gloss over the truth.
The ghosts of India's contentious medieval history have come knocking again.
I hustle for the truth. On the ground, in the newsroom, in the studio. I don't try to grab eyeballs.
I inform you to make you see the point.
To the Point with Preeti Chaudhary. At these times, only on India Today.
Co-powered by RK Marble, Khoobsurat Imandari. In association with JioMart, Har Ghar Ka Mart.
With every sunrise comes new beginnings, new opportunities and new stories. And that's why we're first up. While you're sleeping, we're hard at work to ensure you get the perfect news shot every morning. Get you all the updates. Our morning mission, to get you news that's fresh and packed with flavor. Watch First Up every weekday morning with me, Akshata Nandagopal, right here on India Today.
Co-powered by The World Comes Together at Sardar University. Co-powered by RK Marble, Khoobsurat Imandari. In association with Dell, advice and expertise to help your business grow. EcoLink LED lights and fans.
In a first, China has sent their JH-7A fighter bomber to Thailand. China's People Liberation Army Air Force and the Royal Thai Air Force are holding a joint Air Force exercise. The motto behind this exercise is to deepen their military ties and build mutual trust between the forces. The exercise is being carried out under Falcon Strike. This exercise is being held at an RTAF base in northern Thailand near the border with Laos. In the joint exercise, China's 6 J-10C fighter jets, JH-7AI fighter bomber, Shangchi KJ-500, a warning and control aircraft, are joining Thailand's 5 Gripen aircraft, 3 Alpha Jet attack aircraft, Saab 340AEW early warning and control aircraft. As per reports, this exercise is the 5th of its kind since 2015. The annual fighter jet exercise was put on hold in the last 2 years due to the pandemic. Thailand purchases and adopts its weapons as per the Western training methods. This will help China understand the Western equipment performances and tactics. Thailand is one of the US's oldest Asian allies. However, their ties were complicated by a military coup in 2014. This training comes as the US holds combat drills in Indonesia with Australia, Japan, Singapore and Indonesia. This will be held in the largest iteration of Super Garuda Shield exercises since 2009.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Everyone's busy finding what's trending. You're busy finding out why. India Today, for those who research before reacting. Download the India Today app now.
The Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle, the Hoodoo Sea. This region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean has been of interest for decades. The mysterious place has captured the human imagination with unexplained disappearances of ships, planes and people. And now an Australian scientist claims that he has solved the mystery. The region first gained notice in 1945. Flight 19 was a 5-plane flight that took off from Florida with 14 crew members on board. The TBM Avenger torpedo bombers of the US Navy were on a 2-hour normal training flight when they lost communication with the base. The planes mysteriously vanished along with their crews and no debris was ever discovered. To add to it, the PBM-5 with 13 crew members on board departed to search for the missing flight. But 20 minutes into the flight, it exploded. Since then, about 50 ships and 20 airplanes have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle for unknown causes. The wreckage has not been recovered. The Bermuda Triangle has been the subject of many Hollywood thrillers and mysteries. Beyond the Bermuda Triangle, Satan's Triangle, Death Ship, The Triangle, and many more movies catapulted the region into the mainstream. The unsolved mystery, of course, led to conspiracy theories. Some people point to wormhole as a reason why many vessels aren't found after crashing in the Bermuda. Others point to a hole in the planet's electromagnetic forces. Some even believe that large amounts of methane gas that exist in some spots of the ocean floor are responsible for the disappearances. Then there are also theories about aliens and the existence of the mythical lost city of Atlantis in the area. Australian scientist Carl Krushelnicki has dismissed all these claims. According to him, the high number of disappearances cannot be explained by aliens or Atlantis. He suggests that the mystery is nothing more than a perfect mix of human error, bad weather, and a high concentration of ships in the area. He in fact suggests that there is no mystery at all. He said that because of its proximity to the equator and the United States, there is a lot of traffic in the region, and the number of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is the same as in any other part of the world. So what do you make of the mystery? Has the mystery of Bermuda Triangle been solved?
Everyone's busy finding what's trending. You're busy finding out why. India Today, for those who research before reacting. Download the India Today app now.
Co-powered by HDFC Bank Parivartan, a step towards sustainable progress. In association with Hetic Fittings, make your furniture work beautifully. ऑफर पे ऑफर सिर्फ कल्याण ज्वेलर्स में. LIC हर पल आपके साथ.
Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from Taipei in Taiwan. I'm Gaurav Sawant. This is a country that's facing Chinese aggression every day. There are military drills that China has been carrying out ever since US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited this island and that presidential office right behind me. But when you look all around, this is a place that's actually gearing up for a party. And that's exactly what is happening here in Taiwan. You have the strobe lights, you have a stage that's set for a concert, and you have the fog machine. So what's the message that Taiwan is giving out? And a message, incidentally, that goes out right from outside President Tsai Ing-wen's office. That is the president's office here in Taiwan. And during the course of the next half hour, we will tell you how Taiwan is actually sending a very conscious message to Beijing. It's a message from Tsai Ing-wen to Xi Jinping that Taiwan is not scared, that Taiwan will not buckle under pressure, that Taiwan will continue to party hard and to fight hard to protect its integrity.
Chinese war clouds over Taiwan have darkened, with fighter jets roaring in the sky. Missiles blasting off from Chinese launch pads. The campaign of fear and intimidation is snowballing with each passing day. A tiny island standing up to China's bullying tactics, amidst the roar of Taiwan's F-16 fighters mounting a counterflex to China, and tensions are likely to worsen, with the Japanese delegation set to arrive in Taiwan next week. India Today is on the island as part of world-exclusive coverage of the crisis.
There is a sharp spike in tension between Taiwan and China, especially after Taiwan now conducting a series of war drills, including using its latest F-16 Vipers with their air-to-air and air-to-ship missiles in these exercises. And this is the presidential office, President Tsai Ing-wen's office. This is where Taiwan's President Tsai met US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This is where she also met a bipartisan delegation of US congressmen, and this is where a group of Japanese lawmakers are set to arrive.
The situation may be grim around the island, but here in Taipei, students continue to attend schools in full numbers.
Despite war clouds in border areas around Taiwan, the situation in Taipei, as you can see around me, this is the Taipei First Girls High School in Taiwan, and students continue to come to school. School continues to function as normal, and the reason for this, teachers tell us here, is that they're extremely confident that Taiwan's Army, Navy and Air Force are able to protect their borders. Once borders are safe, there is no question of any trouble.
Taiwan has been intimidated for decades, but the new escalation is historic by any standards, and the island isn't holding back on sending out a strong message.
Barely 5 minutes from President Tsai Ing-wen's office, this is the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. The 89 steps that lead to this hall indicate his age. Chiang Kai-shek, the first president of Taiwan, and of course one of the founding fathers along with Sun Yat-sen, lived to the age of 89. There is a hall that you see here and a stage that's been set for a musical show, a jazz concert. Jazz concert when there are war clouds over Taiwan, you'd ask, but that is exactly what Taiwan says. We have our forces at the borders, say Taiwan's security personnel. They will guard the borders, and that is why the people in Taiwan are absolutely safe. And it's for China to face the music.
China may try to muscle the island nation, but with the support of the US, Japan and other nations and its arsenal, Taiwan is capable of giving China a bloody nose if the war nightmare turns into a reality. With Gaurav Sawant in Taipei, Taiwan. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, China is not taking kindly to any of these measures by Taiwan, whether it was Nancy Pelosi's arrival or the congressional delegation that came from the United States. How will China react when the delegation comes from Japan? And incidentally, after Japan, there's a delegation that's coming in from Canada. There are other delegations that are coming in. US is planning to send a trade delegation to begin trade negotiations with Taiwan in a bigger way. This is democracies pushing back against expansionist forces. But is Taiwan likely to face the brunt of China's actions? What will happen in case China does up the ante? In case there is conflict, what does it mean for Taiwan? What does it mean for China? India Today's Shiv Arur with this report.
Can China capture Taiwan using air power? With such a giant air force, what would such an air campaign look like? Let's get one thing totally clear. Any air battle between China and Taiwan will be a seriously bloody affair, and we'll tell you why. For starters, if military air combat is already a difficult and risky affair, it is exponentially more so over ocean. And since Taiwan is an island about 200 kilometers off China's coast, China's air power campaign will have to be a maritime affair. In March 2021, in a demonstration flight that shadowed the current crisis, China conducted an aerial mission specifically focused on aerially surrounding Taiwan and cutting it off entirely from the eastern side. The mission showed Chinese H-6 bomber fleets escorted by fighters flying through the Bashi Strait that separates Taiwan from the Philippines and arriving on the vulnerable eastern side of Taiwan, the key to debilitating the island. Of course, in a real combat scenario, a high-tech Taiwanese air force wouldn't let the bombers fly so easily. Plus, China has limited experience in over-ocean flights. But these are broad simulations. That China is even practicing such flights means it is in the realm of its warfare plans. It's crucial to remember that in any potential air battle, Taiwan wouldn't be alone. The US Navy's 7th Fleet remains deployed in the Pacific east of Taiwan with heavy-duty aerial combat assets. Alongside Japanese and American fighter assets stationed in Japan, committed to protecting Taiwan from China. Which means any Chinese air combat plans to encircle Taiwan will be met with brutal high-tech resistance. If China attempts an aerial encirclement of Taiwan, it will have to contend with America's F-18 Super Hornets of the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier and formidable F-22 Raptor stealth fighters stationed in Japan, among others. There will likely be heavy losses on both sides, but one thing remains certain. The invasion and control of Taiwan may be a difficult, logistically nightmarish prospect for China, but everything that China is now doing around Taiwan points to the reality of the possibility. With Gaurav Sawant in Taipei, Taiwan, Bureau Report, India Today.
It's not just on ground, in water or in the air. Taiwan is also pushing back diplomatically, militarily and diplomatically. And this time, Taiwan has sought India's assistance to be an observer at the Interpol General Assembly. Interpol General Assembly 2022 is being organized in New Delhi in October. Taiwan was edged out by China in 1984, and ever since, Taiwan has been trying to get back rather unsuccessfully. This time, Taiwan hopes India will extend an invitation to be an observer. I spoke to Commissioner Lee, the Commissioner of Taiwan's Criminal Investigation Bureau, who says when it comes to transnational crimes, especially post-pandemic, whether it's related to cryptocurrency, money laundering or human trafficking, Taiwan can play a very crucial role. I bring you this India Today exclusive. Post the COVID pandemic of 2019, what has been your finding? What's the biggest spurt in crime? Is it money laundering related to cryptocurrency, or is it human trafficking? What have Taiwan's findings been?
Post-pandemic fraud crime is very serious in our country and all over the world. All the criminals are able to facilitate internet and try to conduct money laundering for cryptocurrency. Once these frauds are committed, they ask the victims to earn money through the cryptocurrency platform. So we discovered that post-pandemic fraud crime has become notorious and a big issue for the police officers all over the world.
The biggest meet of police personnel from across the world, the Interpol General Assembly is taking place in India in October. What is your strategy as Taiwan police to be a part of this?
Taiwan is not a member state of Interpol. However, India is the host country that had the power to invite the police body from all over the world to participate in the General Assembly. We hope and expect that India and other Interpols invite Taiwan as an observer.